Let's talk about the fight that Apple and one of the world's biggest video game makers, Epic Games, the makers of Fortnite, are having about this. Hey, what up? It's your boy MobbJustice back again with another video. Thank you to everyone who's been watching our videos all along. Now, for today, we're going to be talking about something that's been big in the world of technology and business. And it's a story I wanted to do this video last week, but there's just been so much that's been going on, so many developments in the story, and that's the fight that's going on between Apple and one of the world's biggest video game developers, that is Epic Games. They are the makers of Fortnite. They are associated with Tencent, which is one of the biggest technology companies in China, and also said to be, by some estimates, the biggest gaming company in the world that no one has ever heard of. Now, instead of running through the story and everything that's happened and what precipitated where we are right now, there are so many videos online that I will link in the description below that will actually explain the genesis of the issue. But in terms of the way that Epic Games has actually gone about this, I think it was very crafty what they did, because basically they went and offered a bit of a discount for some of their features in Fortnite, going against Apple's developer rules and in-app purchases, because as we know, Apple takes a 30% cut or commission of in-app purchases that are made through iOS apps that are downloaded through the iOS App Store. And then Epic Games actually enabled this feature on purpose to show customers that this is what they would be paying if Apple was to not take that 30% cut. They gave customers a 20% discount, and then they just showed that if the 30% wasn't there, then it's possible that consumers could take a 20% cut, and then the other 10% would maybe go to Epic Games. The reason why this is crafty, this is where I begin now, is because you've moved the issue from being a fight between Epic Games and Apple to now going into the court of public opinion. And that's quite crucial, because in our last episode we spoke around Instagram Reels and the fight with TikTok and US-China trade war, all of these things. But one of the things that we're talking about in that episode was this thing that's happening with US lawmakers taking in the big tech CEOs. That's Jeff Bezos at Amazon, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, Tim Cook at Apple, and Sundar Pichai at Google. And where Apple is concerned, one of the big things that they're being investigated on is anti-competitive behavior, that they have a monopoly over the Apple the Apple iOS App Store, and that the cut that they're taking from developers in terms of having apps listed there is actually too high at 30%. So in terms of that, I thought it was quite crafty that Epic Games orchestrated the series of events, enabling the discount, and then knowing that they were going to be banned, and then getting into this public war, taking these things to the court of public opinion because of a number of things. The first one is, consumers now seeing for themselves what discounts would be possible if Apple wasn't taking the 30%, whilst at the same time, making this move against the backdrop of these investigations going on with tech companies on the one side and US lawmakers on the other. And then all at the same time, just understanding the fact that Epic Games has grown a lot, due to iOS adoption, one, and also just bearing in mind that they do have their own app store. So I'm actually in the process of editing this video that you're watching right now, And there have been some key developments that have happened. As I said, it's taken some time to release this video. Firstly, Democrats in the United States have issued a report urging Congress to actually break up the big tech companies as part of this investigation that's going on around the big tech companies. And then the second thing is just the fact that there are some rumors, some mutterings here and there that Apple and Epic Games might come to some type of an agreement about how to reinstate the game on mobile, especially if Epic is to remove the payment options from the game. It is in the best interests of both companies. They are losing a lot of money from the game not being up, but the trial date has actually been moved to sometime mid next year, and that's it. So back to the video. In terms of the latest developments on this issue, there have just been two key ones. The first one is that courts have sided with Apple for now, saying that Apple does not have to reinstate Fortnite, which has since been banned from the App Store. But at the same time, the judge has ruled that Apple can't get rid of Fortnite's developer account, which is one of the things that Apple was trying to go for. Anything else beyond that, once again, link videos in the description below. Now that we have some of the background and news out of the way, we can actually discuss some of the meat and potatoes of this issue. Now, the first one is that the key thing about digital spaces is that in a lot of cases, they are mimicking or trying to replace something that actually happens in the real world, right? Because if you think about it, right, having a game in the iOS App Store is the equivalent of having a physical game disc, right? If we remember the Xbox and the PlayStation discs, right, it's the same as having one of those discs, one of those games in your physical location, in your physical store, and then people walking through the door, browsing the shelves, going and saying, I want to buy, let's say, the latest version of FIFA, for example, and then you take it off the shelf, you go and you purchase it. And that is exactly the same thing that's happening on the iOS App Store, right? You are creating a virtual version of that situation, and whether we like it or not, Apple was the innovator when it came to app stores, and at the same time they were the ones that actually popularized the concept, developed a business model around it, and actually created this massive user base that developers like Fortnite have now benefited from over a number of years, and would otherwise not be able to get in touch with without that app store. What makes the iOS App Store different from Google's one is the fact that without the iOS App Store, you cannot install your apps there. Whereas with Google Play, on the Android side, there's always an option to sideload. In the same way that on a Mac or on a PC, you can simply just get an execution file or a DMG file for one of those programs and just install without necessarily going through an official app store. The real question now, when you now have all of that in context, is who needs who more, right? Is it that Apple needs Fortnite to keep people using iPhones, to have an app that's popular that gets people to buy more iPhones, or is it that Fortnite and Epic Games needs to tap into the iOS ecosystem to grow their user base? These are the actual issues that are at play right now. And the other big bet that Fortnite is sort of taking at the moment is, one has to ask, can Fortnite continue to thrive without growing its user base in the iOS ecosystem if this is a stalemate? If we're to assume that the current state at the moment is a permanent position where you have Fortnite taken down from the iOS App Store, right? Existing users that do have the app on their phone do have the ability to continue using the app right now. So, you've got that user base. But in terms of growth, can Fortnite, can Epic Games continue to thrive without, tapping into the iOS ecosystem? That is the real question that Epic Games, that's the real bet, that Epic Games is making right now, because they're trying to force some type of change in the way that Apple conducts this business and reduce the amount of money that Apple is actually taking from them, reduce it from the 30%, which, by the way, is the same amount of money that Google also takes from app developers. The only difference is that in Google's case, Android does have that ability to have apps that are side loaded. You can download installation files and just side load your apps in that way. The second big issue that really needs to be explored here is placement in that app store. We spoke earlier on about the example of the physical store and how that's being mimicked, and people are sort of trying to replace that real world experience with a virtual one, and that's what the app store does. And if you actually think about what happens in the real world, to get yourself into certain stores, there are deals that have to be struck, right, in the real world. Right, that's the first thing. The other thing that developers like Fortnite have argued, particularly Spotify, because Spotify has had its own battles with Apple and the way that it works, because Apple is, for example, Apple Music is a competing product to iOS, but at the same time, Spotify is on the App Store but has to give up 30% of the revenue that it makes off of iPhones. And Apple's argument is simple, and I agree with that principle of you have to pay to play, because if you want to get into the Apple ecosystem, whether you like it or not, Apple is the one that controls that ecosystem, right? If you don't want to play by their rules, then just leave. Right, it sounds a bit harsh to say, but that's one of those things that Apple has been able to get right in terms of iOS. The Mac App Store, if you notice, is more open, right? The Mac platform is open compared to the iOS ecosystem. With iOS, you can only get apps there, but on PCs and on the laptop and desktop side, you can get your files from anywhere, download them, you boot up. And the reason why I'm saying that is because if you look at the moves that other manufacturers or other app store owners are trying to make, look at what's going on with Microsoft. The first PC desktop operating system, very popular, but if you look at them, they've developed their own app store now, right? You've got the Android, the Google Play Store, even Epic Games themselves, they have their own app store. And when it comes to some of the developers and you look at what Google's trying to do, Google is open source, right? But at some point there's a problem with being open source, because you can't really control what comes onto your platform and what doesn't. And one of the value propositions to iPhone users is the fact that the apps that you download onto your phone have been checked and have gone through this rigorous process of being listed on the App Store. iPhone users just want things that work. Android users just want the ability to be able to get things, whatever they want onto their device, which works, for that platform. But if you want to play by Apple's rules, then those are the rules that they have in place. If you think about a market, for example, let's say a farmer's market, one of those Sunday markets that people go to, right? Most of the time, to go and sell in one of those places, you physically have to go and pay the organizers of an event, the organizers of a festival. You pay them to actually, you apply, people run through application and then they say, yes, sure, you can come in and set up your store at our event, and then but to have that store, you're gonna have to pay an X amount to be here, and you work out a deal, you go there. And some businesses have been able to grow really big. So now you have to think to yourself, what is the value of having access to millions of iPhones around the world? Because what Epic Games is trying to do in terms of changing how Apple does business, because there's two outcomes that can happen here. One, one, and I think this one is the more reasonable of the two, is Apple and Epic Games reach a settlement where they reduce the amount of money that developers can actually get, that developers pay, to Apple, right? That seems to be the more workable solution here. But in terms of that, Apple's gonna have to probably come up with a tiered system, right? To say that if you're a big developer, because Epic Games has millions and millions of users around the world for their different games, especially Fortnite, right? Past a certain point, we'll reduce, let's say, by 5%, by another 5%, right? That seems to be the more workable solution. The other way of doing things, which is what US lawmakers are trying to fight for, one of the things that they're trying to fight for, is where you have Apple letting go of the keys to iPhones. So you're basically having that ability where people can get apps for the iPhone on other platforms, which for iPhone users, and with the way that Apple does things, might be a bit tough, because that then gets rid of a number of things. First, the luster of the walled garden, but also secondly, the rigor in terms of being able to get certain iOS apps onto the App Store, right? Because it's a check and a balance for iPhone users, that that this thing has gone through the Apple accreditation process, and if something goes wrong, you have someone to actually go and blame, and you say, Apple, this thing was on my phone, there was an app on my iPhone, and it wasn't doing what it was meant to do. What is the recourse? You have someone to point to, right? And that's Apple. But when you open up the platform and you invite third-party applications, if they have in this world of cybersecurity threats, etc., if you infect your phone with malware or something like that, the onus is on you, right? And that's one of the trade-offs that people are going to have to grapple with when it comes to this debate going forward. So moving forward, there are two things that I think will be interesting to actually observe going forward. The first one is, what type of bearing is this issue going to have on the hearings, on the investigation that US lawmakers are actually engaged with when it comes to the tech companies? Because we saw when they did those hearings a few weeks ago that they had done a lot of research, and some of the issues around that Fortnite is highlighting are some of the things that they were talking about then. Is this case, because it's so high profile and it's something that we can't ignore, is it something that's going to sway the type of decision or the type of sanctions, if any, that they might put on Apple? That's the first thing. The second thing is what type of settlement, what type of equilibrium we're going to see. Because the reason why this is such a big issue is, yes, Epic Games is a big developer, but there are a lot of small developers that, for them 30% is worth it, because they get access to all of those millions of Apple devices. Is Apple going to now institute maybe a tiered system? How are they going to settle that issue? As I said, likely the best outcome is to have Epic Games and Apple coming up with a structure where they reduce the amount of commission. But what's important and what's key for Apple at the moment is to retain control of the App Store, because that's what makes the App Store the App Store. Without that control, if iOS users are then able to get apps from outside of the App Store, it might compromise the integrity of the iPhone experience, and we know how much Apple values that Apple experience. Perhaps in closing, I should make it clear that as much as I've spoken in a way that might seem as if I'm here to protect Apple, that isn't the case, right? All I'm just saying is that part of Apple's competitive advantage is the fact that they control what actually comes in and out of their ecosystem, right? Which, you know, integrity, user experience, all of that stuff. And whether we like it or not, those are the things that iPhone users actually get into the Apple ecosystem for. They want accountability, right? As I said earlier on, if an app doesn't work, if something goes wrong, you know, an Apple user wants to be able to go to someone, turn to someone and be like, hey, Apple, why did you let this thing on? And that's sort of the trade-off that you take. At the same time, something needs to be given credence, respect, needs to be put on Apple's name for having developed the iOS App Store, right? They were the first ones to do it on the scale that they did and in the way that they did, and actually coming up with that business model. But at the same time, one has to recognize Apple's shortcomings, because for example, they have made a lot of noise. We heard even Tim Cook talking about it in the hearings a few weeks ago, that Apple applies the 30% commissions to all its app developers, but at the same time, those same US lawmakers were able to find evidence where Apple has come up with special arrangements with bigger app developers like Amazon, where they were able to reduce those commissions and those rates. So from that point of view, that does not make Apple look good in any way. It sort of takes away the integrity and you know, whatever moral high ground that they had, and it makes it seem as if only a large company can actually negotiate, you know, with Apple. That's the first thing. The second one is, you know, one of the things that recently happened in the last couple of days, and that's a development with WordPress, where WordPress was actually advertising some of the more premium features that users can actually get if they go to the website, buy a premium experience, etc. And now you have Apple talking about how some of those premium features should be enabled inside the app, and you know, that would then lead to Apple then having more control and then taking a bigger chunk of those premium earnings, the payment processing, all of that stuff. And those things, it becomes murky, because it then makes it seem as if Apple is trying to have its finger in all the pies. Yes, at the same time, Apple will say that rather have your data processed through our system because it's safe, but at the same time, it does not bode well for, you know, the image of a big company trying to control everything. So the way that Apple has handled itself on, you know, some of these fronts does not make them look good in any way. So with that, we've come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much to everyone who was watching. Let us know what you think in the comments. You know, how deep do you think this Epic Games versus Apple battle could, you know, potentially get? We've been seeing, you know, blow by blow. There was the ad that Epic Games, you know, put out. You know, now people are taking each other to court. How far could this thing actually go? As I said at the beginning, the big thing is the fact that this case could have a bearing on, you know, all developers going forward, and how App Store owners actually then interact with developers, because other app stores like the iOS, like the Android Google Play Store, they've actually taken a lot of leads from what Apple does, right? The argument is that Google takes its 30% cut because Apple takes a 30% cut. So how these two big warring parties settle this is gonna have big ramifications going forward. And it's also important because at the same time, Apple recently, you know, cleared that line where they are now a $2 trillion company, which is just massive. But at the same time, they're trying to grow their services revenue in line of what are thought to be, you know, declining iPhone sales. So all of these issues are very important for the future of the company and for the future of the industry in terms of apps. Let us know what you think. I will catch you guys in the next video.
Hey, this is Baby G and you're watching the Mob Justice channel. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Live it, love it, like it. This is the Mob Justice TV.
No.